Whoops. We can't hear you yet, Sophia. I can tell that you're talking, but I don't hear you yet. Now we can hear you. Great.
Okay.
Great. So Sophia, could you introduce yourself? I'm not sure that others know you, or maybe they do, but not everyone knows you anyway.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm Sophia. I'm Lula's niece. So yeah, and I'm just trying to see like what you guys are doing and stuff, and then if I really like it, then I start doing it myself.
All right, fantastic. Yeah. All right, you're glad to have you, Sophia. So, okay. How about if we do a short review here, just to get everyone synchronized and to get Sophia caught up on where we are. Let's see. I just want to make sure that Finn and Lee are on board. Let's wait a couple of minutes to see if Finn and Lee join, so we'll have everyone on. Would anyone like to, while we're waiting a couple of minutes, would anyone like to show any work they've done on their website over the week? Anyone had a chance to work on their personal website? Okay. How about this? Would someone like to present their lab book? I know we've done this before, but I just want to make sure we're all synchronized on the problem mission and how we're structuring the process for developing a website. All right, let me take the lead.
I have a question.
Yes, who's this?
Oh, it's Mario.
Mario, hola Mario.
I think like 3 weeks ago you told me that it's better not to put the links to the other sites of my website. At the bottom, you told me that it is better that I put it upper. So why is it?
Okay. Oh, good question, Mario. So here's the issue with that. If you put your links at the bottom of the page, what happens if you have a really long page? The links are going to be off the page and you won't even see them, right? And your links will go up and down depending on how much text you have in the body of your web page. So it's usually good, Mario, to have your links, your navigation bar anchored so that on every single page, it's exactly in the same spot. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I hope I answered your question. That's a very good question, by the way. Okay. So let me just quickly go through and synchronize everyone with the lab book that I've been creating sort of in parallel with what you've been doing. So first of all, we did a title page, went to Google, looked for some images and copied and pasted them on the lab book. The goal here is that you're really comfortable using PowerPoint. It's a super, super valuable tool. You'll use it many, many, many times in your career. If you present your ideas well in PowerPoint, that's a super, super valuable skill. So the first thing we did in developing our website is we said, okay, who do we want our website to address? Who's our target audience? And what do we want that target audience to do? So many of us zeroed in, we like to build a website that we'd like to show our friends and share ideas and maybe even make new friends. Another target audience is we want to be able to have a website that could help us get into the schools of our choice. A website that would convince either employers or school admissions offices, that we're passionate about technology, and that we have some really valuable experiences under our belt. And then the third thing we did in the process of developing our website is we diagrammed the information architecture. So every website should have a logical structure, sections for the content you want to present, and a logical structure for those sections. So then after we have our target audience and goals set and our information architecture set, then we took a sort of a break and just played and did a cartoon session. And one of the reasons we did this is to help you get comfortable with the PowerPoint drawing features. You may not, be so into cartoons, but very often cartoons are useful in sort of attracting attention and lightening up a meeting. But cartoons especially force you to think about using the drawing tools in PowerPoint very aggressively. So we all sort of got an introduction to the key points of a successful cartoon. We talked about file naming conventions. We're very, very strict when you're on our development team about how you name your files. And these are 3 rules that we insist that every developer at Build It Yourself follows. Only lowercase letters, long descriptive file names. So just from looking at the file name, you can tell exactly what it is. And 3, we want you to use dashes in between words, not underscore or spaces. Would anyone like to explain why we have those rules? Anyone know why we only use lowercase letters in all of our file names? Daniel, do you want to take a cut at your experience with this? Because I know you followed these guidelines last summer. Okay. Daniel, are you there? Great. Okay, yeah, most of you should know Daniel. Oop, we still can't hear you, Daniel. Can you speak again? It's just coming, it's breaking up, but I think, unfortunately, your connection is breaking up, Daniel. Let me go through quickly the reasons why we use these file naming conventions and why we're so strict. So it's the case that when you're using a Microsoft server, web server, Microsoft does not distinguish between upper and lowercase letters. So when you build a website and you link to a file that is upper and lower cases, but you refer to it as all lower cases, it'll play well on that Microsoft server. If you upload your files to a Unix or Linux server, then Linux differentiates between upper and lower case, and it may play well on your Microsoft server locally, but it won't work on your Linux server, and it's a big pain in the neck to troubleshoot when links don't work because of upper and lower case conflicts. So when you're working on big websites, professional developers very often follow this rule very strictly. No uppercase letters in your file names. We want your file names to be descriptive and hierarchical so that they sort well when you display a long file directory. If your names are hierarchical, then they will sort in a very logical fashion naturally. And the third file naming conventions is we don't like you to use underscores or spaces between words, because sometimes when a link is underscored, you can't tell the difference between a space and an underscore. And sometimes when you put spaces between words, sometimes if a string of characters are kern, that is not equal spaces for every letter, you can't tell if it's a space or not. So professional developers usually follow these rules very carefully. And I can tell you that when I'm interviewing a programmer, I very often look at how they name their files. And if they name their files well, to me, that's a very important sign that they've worked on big projects and they have good work habits. So sometimes employers will look for very small things like how you name your files. Sometimes people will send me a resume and they'll just name the file resume. And then when I put it in a folder with 50 other resumes, I have no idea who it is. The person who names their file resume dash and their full name, that's the person that I think has a more thoughtful approach to organization. Okay, I'm sorry to harp so much on this, but these are rules that we follow very, very strictly on our development team. Any questions about this? Be good if you can document these pages in your lab book and be able to explain this to new members. And then another presentation we did, just in the way of reviewing, is the process that we use for planning a project. Generally, when you have a big project, you divide your tasks to complete that project in 4 categories, 4 phases of project management. The first phase is the discover phase, where you do your research, define the goals, where you set up your infrastructure, introduce your teammates, and so forth. You get a sort of big picture of the project. And then the second phase is the design phase, where you do all of your paper drawings, just noodling, brainstorming, writing the functional spec, what's the user see, and maybe and then the design spec, what do the programmers need. And then also in the design phase, you want to make an estimate for how big this project is. How many hours are involved? What's the budget going to be? What team members do you need to recruit, to hire, to execute all the functions, all the tasks in this project? And then the third phase is the development phase. That's where you build or code. And the fourth phase, deploy, is where you document, train, test, and present your project to the world. In a big project, very often you will find that there will be roughly equal time for all phases. That is, if you spend 25% of your time on each of these phases, you'll generally get a better result than if you do no research, you don't define your goals well, and you sort of jump right into development. You start hammering and sawing before you've got a blueprint to work from. And then very often you don't think about leaving time for documenting, which means if you don't document, you'll never be able to edit your design. So we enforce this project management thinking when you're on our development team. Okay, any questions about this? This is kind of the big picture. This is kind of laying the foundation for you guys to be on our development team and to work first on your personal websites and then ultimately on much bigger projects. Any questions? Any comments? Okay. So I'm going to go now to another PowerPoint and just review a little bit about what we talked about last week. Let me jump up here real quickly. After we go through this, then Brent's going to show you a table page layout, and we'll hand the ball off to you guys to develop table pages that could fit into your personal websites. Okay, let me start with the diagram of how the web works. Anyone want to explain this? how the web works. It's great if you guys practice presenting this, because if you teach for Build It Yourself when you get to college, it's good to have practice presenting these PowerPoints, because these are PowerPoints that we present to our members when we teach them. Anyone like to explain how the web works? Just talk around these slides. Okay. All right, I'll go through it real quick. So we have a client. That's where the end user sits. The client makes a request for a website that goes to your local ISP. That's like buildityourself.com. The internet doesn't understand buildityourself.com. The letters are very hard for computers to interpret, take a long time, but computers are really, really quick at interpreting numbers. So what happens is the local ISP sends your domain name to a domain name server that translates it to an IP address, set of numbers. Then it sends that IP address via a network of routers and switchers to a server, a web server, where your web page is located. And then that web server goes, fetches the HTML code from the web server and sends it back to the ISP. The ISP, your local ISP, then sends it back to you. And all of that, if you were fetching a website from China, starting in Boston, it would take you less than half a second to get your request to China and to send your web page back to your client, depending, of course, on how long your web page is. All that makes sense so far? Any questions? It's important that you understand how the hardware works. You'll be much better programmers if you understand how the hardware works. One last slide to present so that you understand what's happening on your local computer. So when the web returns HTML code that you've requested, a browser interprets that HTML code and lays out the page on your screen. That's the final step. Okay, I'm hoping that in the future you guys will be able to explain that process clearly, concisely, and convincingly. Be able to teach others, explain to others how the web works. Okay.
Question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Who is this?
Mario.
Mario again. Okay. Hi, Mario.
And how do switches and routers, how do they connect between them? By satellites or by cables?
Oh, very good question. Okay. So it depends on where in the world you are. Sometimes it's via fiber optics cables. Sometimes it's via hardwired cables. Sometimes it's via satellite. The connections between the routers and the servers could be any combination of wires, fibers, or satellite transmissions. Did that answer your question? Anyone else have anything to add to that?
So it will depend on the geographic conditions. For example, if I'm sending something from LA to Boston and it's directly going, it can be through optic fibers.
Yes.
But if I'm sending something from Boston to, I don't know, Japan, maybe it's going to be via satellites, right?
Partly via wire, partly via optic cables, and partly via satellite. The interesting part about what you say, what you ask, Mario, is that first of all, what gets transmitted between these switches and routers are packets of information. So they don't send the whole HTML file all at once. they divide it up into small packets of information. It's about, I think, 256 bits per packet. I'm not exactly sure of that, but it's a small amount of data. And the amazing thing about the web, these routers and switches, is that they'll break up your request or your HTML file into small packets, and it will send those packets via any route that has the least traffic. So if you're going from California to Boston, the web may say there's too much traffic between Boston and Cambridge, or Boston and California. I'm going to send it via China, because even though it's a longer route, there's less traffic there, so it'll go quicker. So you have no idea where it's going to, and it may send part of your HTML file to China, another part to Japan, another part to Africa, and another part directly to Boston. It divides your information, and it sends it via the path of least resistance. And then it's compiled. All of your packets are compiled when they get back to your server, to your ISP. Does that make sense? It's very, very complicated. It's genius how it works. It's amazing that it works so quickly and so reliably, given how complex it is.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. But when you start developing really complicated websites, sometimes it's very useful to know how this information is transmitted. Okay, very good. Good question, Mario. All right, we want to just present to you, we started diving right into web page development. We just gave you a template last week and we started editing it. We want to step back just a second and explain how an HTML file is structured. So basically, an HTML file starts and ends with two tags that define the whole HTML file. Then the HTML file is divided into two sections, a header section and a body section. Anyone want to explain what's in the header section and what's in the body section? Love it if you guys help share what you know. Okay, so generally in the header part of your HTML file will be the page description that Google or any search engine uses to find and display information about your page. It also could include CSS and JavaScript files, but it's generally used for descriptive information, reference information. And then in the body part of your HTML file, that's where the information that lays out your content exists. That's the page layout code. Okay, so that's the big picture. Then drilling down to what the body section looks like. You open the body tag, define your background color. This is a comment tag, which means the browser is not going to execute any text that's inside of this comment tag. It's very important that you document your code. So whenever you want to explain what you're doing in a code, use a comment like this and it won't get executed. Then we're going to center our text and our image. So we open the center tag and notice how everything is indented. Indenting your code is very, very important, guys. It's important in some languages because if you don't indent your code properly, the computer won't even execute it. In other languages, it's very useful to indent your code so it's easier to read, easier to edit. Here I can just take this whole section right here and copy and paste it elsewhere if I want to replicate this. So we want you to indent your code. Here's an example of terrible HTML code, right? How in the world are you going to read this? But if you indent that code, it looks like this, and it's very easy to find what you want. So before we will put any code to a live server, we want to make sure that it's indented properly, so it's editable and readable. Make sense, guys? Brent, I know you've had a lot of experience with this. Any comments on good code and bad code?
Yes, I would say that when you have bad code and basically comments, I almost find even more useful than indenting, but indenting is very important because it will divide different elements. Like if you have a table and then you have other information, you want the table to kind of stand out. And then by commenting, you can know just by glancing through the file, you can even use like a search function. Like a lot of programs, you can hit Control F and use find. So in my code, if I have a certain section, blocked out as a module for something, like let's say it's an animation for the top of the website, I can just hit Control F and type in animated, and I would have commented like animated header or something like that, and it brings me straight to the section I want. And it's really easy to edit. With bad code, it's just a giant mess. I mean, if you don't comment, you can't find anything. And then if you just have code just back to back without any indenting, you can't even read it. Like that's impossible to really read. Imagine like 1,000 lines of that. Being crazy.
Great. Okay, Brent, thank you. We're just trying to drill home, guys, good coding practices. So it's one thing to know how to make something to work. It's another matter to make it work in a way that is editable and readable by your teammates. Okay, fantastic. So last thing before we start coding, guys, just want to drill down a little bit into the logic behind tables, and then Brent's going to take you through executing this from a blank text file. So here's a page layout that is in tables. One quick comment about tables. Tables are kind of antiquated in HTML now for a variety of good reasons, but it's a good way to introduce you into the thinking of how websites are laid out. Eventually, we're going to replace tables with divs. In your next iteration or a version of your personal website, we're going to destroy your table pages and replace them with divs and CSS. But we want you to get an understanding for how the browser interprets HTML code before we get to that level of complexity. So here's pictures in this column and text that go along with this column. If you think about that in terms of a table, here's the column. Whoops. Here's the column. And, oh boy, sorry guys. Well, you see there's two rows and 2 columns. How that breaks down into HTML, so we start with a table tag. We have a table row tag, which is indented two spaces. Then we have a table data tag that defines the first table data cell. And then we have another table data tag that defines the text here. And it's indented exactly like this, so that when you actually see the HTML code, what you see is here's the table tag, here's the table row tag, goes from here to here. That's the first row. Here's the image table data cell, and here's the image table data cell, and here's the text table data cell. All that makes sense as structure. That's the way the browser thinks. Look for the table tag, look for the table row tag, and then look for the table data cells. Is that logical? Okay. So, Brent, can I hand the ball off to you? And would you like to guide everyone through this?
Sure.
Or okay. Creating a table page. You can follow along and start opening up your text editor and Whoops, hold on a second, Brent. Sorry, I gotta stop sharing my screen.
Right. So basically, what we're doing while we're making our first site is we're going to use a lot of templates, just to generate the first few pages, which will help us understand code, and it won't be, too difficult to do that. As a small exercise, I just want to do a very brief introduction to actually coding it from scratch, very basic. And like John was saying, first the browser is going to see the table tag. I did that with indents in the table row, and then table data, which is like the cell basically. It defines the columns. So every time I add in another TD, that big. What this looks like is it's going to create one cell that says content in it. It's very basic. If I add in another TD, and that should have a slash TD and slash TR. I missed that. If I did another one, you'd have an additional row next to it. So let me just show you a quick example by coding it. This first step I'm just gonna do real quick and just show you guys the different ways tables will look, and then I want you guys to follow along and create one. So right now, like John said, I'm just setting up the basics of an HTML page.
Excuse me, Brent, may I make one addition?
Yeah.
I noticed Brent is using spaces rather than tabs to indent. It's a really good practice to use spaces and not tabs. The reason being that tabs are set to different spaces on every computer, and so it can end up looking like a mess after your file has been edited if it includes tabs. So use spaces when you're indenting, and we generally follow the rule of 2 spaces to indent. 2 spaces for every level of indentation. We have 2 guys on our staff that are Google programmers, and I can tell you they are fanatic about following these rules. If you don't follow these rules, you get fired at Google. Well, that may be an exaggeration, but that's my sense for how fanatical they are. When they were guiding our developers last summer, Daniel, you can probably testify to this, when you was very strict about how you wrote your code, no?
Yeah, he was.
Great.
Hi, sorry about a few minutes ago. I was downloading an Autodesk program, and
okay.
I noticed it was a little bit big. It was 6 gigabytes that it was getting from the internet.
You were breaking up.
So yeah, so sorry, but I have canceled it. So
no problem. We can hear you clearly
it's
now.
okay now. Okay.
So just as an example too to what John was saying about good and bad code, I put in the chat box, like if you take a look at different popular websites for one page, this is all the code that goes into the home page of eBay that you get to see. And on their server, there's tons more code to generate this page. So just while we're working on a file that looks like this, remember when you have a fully functional business website, it's going to look a lot more like this. Hundreds and hundreds of lines of code. So that's just to emphasize that point.
Okay. That code that you just saw is really not the way it's coded. Well, there are programs that compile or compress your code to make it efficient. But generally, when programmers are working on their source files, it'll look a lot more like this. So your source files are generally very, very carefully indented and readable. They're not like the eBay site that.
Right.
Yeah.
To better explain that, just briefly, just pretty much each space that you hit, like every time you press the space key in code, that takes up like a bit or a little bit of data, right, John?
Right.
So every time you add a space or an indent, technically your code is becoming a larger file. Now, while that's on your computer, it makes no difference. On a small file, it doesn't make a difference. But if you're serving a website to millions of people globally, or maybe thousands, if not millions, at the same time hitting your server, those few bits will actually make a significant difference over time on how many servers you need, how fast your site loads. So they have a file like this, like John said, but then you compile it, it removes all the spaces, and that's what they upload to their server for the general public to access.
Great, Brent. Thanks for that explanation.
Okay. So as you can see here, this is very, very basic code. It's just HTML, head, close head, body, close HTML. It's raw, bare bones, probably not even enough to technically be like very good. No, not even a title or anything, but so basically, if I took this code, like what John was showing, and I create this, I'll put this next to here. I can do table, open the table tag. Then I want a row. Actually, let me just show you guys what happens if you just do table. It's not going to work correctly. So right now, while the text showed up, it's confused. The browser put the text above the table tag. It's very ugly because it didn't work right. So if I get rid of this and I put table row, do that. There we go. You can see that you don't really see even a table physically there yet. If I put in the last part, the TD, table data, now I officially have an actual table. Let's see if let me give this a border. It's a very small table. Now, if I input some data here, see it appears. If I want to make multiple columns, so more cells going horizontally across, I can just add in more TD tags. Let me make this bigger. And you see I'm making sure I indent. You can kind of see the flow of it. If I wanted more rows, rows going across, I would need to copy where the TR itself is. And if I paste that, now I get a second row. So if I want to erase some of these, to make it simpler to see, if I just want 2 rows, only 1 cell in each, I can get rid of all these other TDs. And let me actually see if I can highlight this better for you guys to visualize. I believe this will let me highlighter. Alright, so if I just this right here is 1 row, 1 cell. So this is another row. That was a row. If I refresh this after saving this, you'll see all those other cells go away. And just like we did earlier, when I showed you guys the you can follow these down with indenting. It's very clean to follow this.
Great, Brent. Okay.
So because I indented, now I can clearly see this is the content. This is the actual data. though it's table data, I like to just think of it as a column. It creates the column, though it's technically the cell. It helps me visualize it better. This is the row, TR, and then you have to have the table defined. So you'll see there's 2 rows, 2 cells, they stack vertically because the rows go across horizontally, and there's 2 rows, so there's 2 horizontal sections. So does anyone have any question on that type of code? Because this is like the most basic you could do to make a table on a website. Okay, let me just open up chat, and would anybody want to try and replicate this before we go to the table template, just to see if they can do it?
I have a feeling everyone's going to be able to do this real easy.
So let's go straight to the template.
Yeah, let's go straight to the template, and the template will have the navigation all built into it. So very often you can build from scratch like this, or you can take a table template that or a page that you really like and copy that text, the HTML part of it. Then it's it's quicker, and you won't have to go through troubleshooting because you know it works.
Yeah, to speak to
Using
that,
templates is useful.
my profession is a web designer, and the last time I created code from scratch, I would have to say is like maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. I always go to like a framework. I'll go to GitHub or different websites where people upload their code for people to use. Or I go to online forums and I find the solution in a matter of minutes that other people, millions of people or hundreds of people maybe, to not exaggerate, have used, and they'll make comments on the forums. And then I have a piece of code I know is tested. I don't have to do that. I just have to piece it together and make sure it works the way I want it to. So with the table template, we want to go. I'll paste the exact link into the chat box.
Brent, let me make one comment here.
Yes.
We're showing you this table content because we're assuming that in your first pass of your website, we're going to simplify the layout. The first page is going to be a title page with just a single image and a title. And then you're going to go into the sections of your website, and the sections are going to be organized just like this, where there's an image in the left column, and then in the first row, in the second column, there's text. So we're going to sort of suggest that you think about laying out your web pages much like this. Image in the left column, and then text that describes that image in the right column. And then once we've gotten comfortable laying out websites like this, then we can show you how to use divs to lay out your content in more unusual ways. Okay.
All right. So basically, that was just while you were talking, John, just drawing over this. So pretty much, you see the rows, you see the data, and the whole thing's a table. So code in it. So exactly what we just did. That's the table template, and then we can just swap out the content versus building it from scratch. All right. So this is the exact link. Let me just make sure. Table HTML template. Yeah.
Brent, so that everyone can go to this page after the webcast, why don't we start from the Build It Yourself homepage and show how we got here? Yep. So
right,
follow this, guys. This is the way to get this template.
So first, obviously, go to buildityourself.com. Then you want to go to missions. In missions, you want to go to computer programming. And in computer programming, you want to go to website design. Let me actually put that. I'm just going to type in the chat box the exact steps. So if anyone wants to save the steps, build-it-yourself.com. Then you go to missions. Then computer programming. And then website design. Alright, then when you're there, you just scroll down and you go to You'll Need. And under you'll see table HTML template. And that brings you to this. And one thing that you'll see me do while you guys navigate to here, when I'm using Chrome, sometimes you'll see me bring up the developers tools, and then maybe times I'll change something like right inside. So so like I can change the text right in here. The problem with this is this doesn't actually save. You'll still have to copy and paste the code. I just changed the code in here because I don't have to refresh the browser, or I can test something before I even bother saving it. It's for developers to debug, but this code doesn't automatically update in your index file. So if you ever see me in here and you start using it, make sure you always make your changes in the actual notepad file, because as soon as I refresh this page, you see the text goes exactly back to what it is. So this is just a tool for testing, debugging, and modifying things, and then you can just copy and paste later. All right, is everyone on this page? I'm assuming. Okay, so the way we want to do this is just like with the home page. We want to go to the source code, which you can do by right-clicking, View Page Source. Or if you don't have that option for any reason, whatever browser you're in should have something in the menu under Tools or View Source. So on Chrome it's More Tools, View Source. And that will bring you to this. And with this code, you just want to copy and paste this into a notepad file. Like last class, we'll save it as an HTML file, and we want to save it in the same root folder. So I just select everything, copy, go to Notepad. I already have a file here. I'll just paste it in here. I'm going to decrease my font just because I think it's kind of a line break too much, just by a little bit. And then I'm going to go to File, Save As. I have my root folder. I'm going to name this, let's see, John, for now, should we just do like table-index or table-page? Should we define what the page is? Am I still on? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure. You guys are quiet, but I just assume that means you guys are very attentive. Alright, so yeah. So John, if you have a suggestion, I'm gonna say table-page is fine. Once we define the page, like let's say it's a personal site and we make a page for hobbies or resume or something like that, portfolio, we'll just rename the file after we define it, and we can just copy and paste this page to make all these pages. So I'm gonna call it table-page.html and save that. And then if I go into my root folder and I open this page, you'll see just like last time, I have my page. The image link is broken because there's nothing saved into the images folder, but it's working fine. Since last week, I have a habit of when I'm doing a build it yourself like intro website, nothing like very complicated, compared to what I do for work, I typically just delete it because I think by redoing it in front of you, it will help emphasize, and also won't really slow me down. Like I delete the folder, so I need to remake my image folder. So in my root directory, I have to make a folder for images, and then in my notepad file, I can just double check. Let's see. cd with images / placemark.jpg. I don't have that image, so off the main page, you'll see that's this. I right click, save image as, go to my desktop, I have it saved in the DIY folder in root images, and let's see what that was. PlaySmart. That's odd. That's saved as with no file extension. There we go. So now if I refresh, let me see this thing in the top. So now if I refresh this, I have my image, and does anyone feel comfortable going to that code and trying to change some of the text or background colors? I could guide you through it.
Brent, what if we do this? We only have a few more minutes here. What if we challenge you guys to evolve your web pages? So complete your title page, which you started last week, and then complete the table pages for each of the sections in your website. And then next week, we'll hand the ball off to you, and you can show us what you've done. Take images for your website and put them in the images folder, set up your file structure, see if you can replicate what we've showed you here. If you don't get all the way through, don't worry, we'll help you next week. Does that register with everyone? Do you think you're in a position to create your title page and then your section pages, section table pages? Anyone think they need some extra help getting there? Okay. I'll assume that you're all, unless you holler, I'll assume you're all able to get up to here. It'd be great to see what you guys can do for next week. If any of you are able to evolve your PowerPoint lab books to lay out your pages, as you putting images in your PowerPoint lab book. Also put those images in your images folder of your website folder, and then develop the code.
All right, Jan, I will do it.
Okay. Brent and I look forward to seeing the results of your personal websites next week. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email Brent or I during the week, or send us what you have during the week. If you have a problem, just send us your HTML file and we'll try to help you debug it. Okay, great guys. I'm gonna send you all a email that sort of summarizes all the lessons we've done up to now. I think 3 or 4 PowerPoint lessons we presented, and an example of what your lab books would look like. I think it's very important to keep your lab books updated, because when you're presenting your personal websites, sometimes it's more important to present your thought process as it is your finished project. So it's very, very important for you to keep good lab books, good records of your work in your lab books. So I'll send you an email that will outline all the things we've done up to now, and then you can update your lab books. Okay, guys, unless there are any questions, have a good week. Hoping to see the start of your pages next week. We'll also show you how to navigate. Once you get your pages set up, we'll show you how you can create one block of navigation code and then copy and paste that to all of your pages so that it's anchored and consistent for all of your pages. So we'll cover navigation next week. once you've created your pages. Don't worry about the navigation now. We'll handle that next week. Okay. Happy sailing this week.